Science claims to explain everything. But here's the problem. It doesn't explain reality, it replaces it. What we call reality in science is just a network of measurements and equations. But where is color, meaning, consciousness? The world science describes is lifeless, stripped of quality, purpose, and depth. What if the greatest illusion is thinking that science shows us the real? This problem we're talking about, the idea that science no longer speaks of reality, is not an exaggeration. It was diagnosed by the founder of phenomenology, Edmund Husserl, in his 1936 work, The Crisis of European Sciences and Transcendental Phenomenology. Husserl begins with a historical and philosophical observation. The modern sciences, physics, biology, psychology, have become increasingly technical, formalized, and abstract. But in doing so, they've lost something essential, a connection to the concrete world of experience, what he calls the Lebenswelt, the life world. The life world is not a theory. It's the pre-theoretical ground of all human meaning. It's the world as it is immediately experienced, the world of chairs, doors, sunsets, voices, not wavelengths, molecules, or force vectors. It's the world we live in before any scientific reflection. For Husserl, this world is the ultimate ground of all sense and all cognition. But modern science, since Galileo, performs what Husserl calls an idealization. It constructs a new kind of nature, purely quantitative, in which only what can be measured and formalized is considered real. This, says Husserl, is the beginning of the crisis. Husserl writes, Galileo was not only a discoverer in a factual sense, but also the inventor of a method, of a new idea of science. Nature itself is now interpreted in such a way that it becomes accessible to ideal, exact calculation. This is what he calls the mathematization of nature. The world of our experience, full of colors, sounds, and meanings, is replaced by a world defined only in terms of spatial temporal coordinates and mathematical functions. But here's the key point. Husserl is not saying this move was false. He's saying it was a projection, a substitution of an ideal world for the real one. The world science studies is not the world as it appears to us, but a constructed idealized model. And eventually science forgets that it is a model and begins to treat it as if it were the only reality. And this forgetting leads to the crisis. Science becomes more powerful in its techniques, but increasingly blind to the very conditions of its possibility. It cannot account for consciousness, meaning, or spirit, what Husserl calls Geist. Quote, "The sciences have become estranged from the vital questions of humanity. They offer methods and results, but not sense." He compares them to machines that keep running after the operator has left. They function, but they no longer know why. The scientist can calculate planetary motion, but cannot say what truth is. He can describe neural impulses, but cannot say what it means to love, or to choose, or to think. For example, physics tells us light has a wavelength of 700 nanometers, but it tells us nothing about the redness of red, the qualitative, immediate phenomenon. Biology describes the mechanics of the heart, but it cannot touch the meaning of a heartbeat felt in fear or longing. And that's the crux. Modern science explains the world as object, but the world is first given to us as phenomenon, as lived, meaningful appearance. Without returning to this foundation, to the life world, science becomes a closed system, complete in method, but empty of truth. If Husserl diagnosed the crisis as the loss of connection between science and the life world, Wolfgang Smith offers a striking analysis of how modern physics deepens and reveals this very crisis. Smith, a mathematician and physicist deeply versed in metaphysics, critiques the modern scientific worldview as materialistic and reductionist, yet internally fractured by its own discoveries, especially in quantum mechanics and relativity. He argues that classical physics, with its mechanistic and deterministic worldview, was already a distortion of reality, but quantum and relativistic physics shattered even those foundations. revealing contradictions that traditional metaphysics had long anticipated. According to Smith, the paradoxes and weirdness of quantum physics, wave-particle duality, uncertainty, entanglement, are symptoms of a deeper conceptual confusion. Modern physics struggles because it remains stuck in a framework that tries to explain reality exclusively through mathematical formalism, detached from metaphysical principles. Smith emphasizes that this separation between mathematics and metaphysics creates a profound disconnect. The equations describe phenomena perfectly, but lack ontological clarity about what those phenomena are. Wolfgang Smith emphasizes a crucial distinction often overlooked by modern physics: the difference between the physical body of lived experience, the corporeal, and the physical body as conceived by scientific theories. He defines two different concepts: X, corporeal, the body as it appears in the sensible world, experienced directly, possessing qualities, form, and presence. This is the world of the living body, organized matter as perceived in concrete reality. And SX, physical, the abstract physical body of modern science, a mathematical construct that reduces the body to points, forces, and fields in an abstract space. This is not the body as it appears, but an idealized mathematical object. According to Smith, this reduction from X to SX removes the qualities of the lived body, rendering it a mere mass or energy field, devoid of sensible presence. Another key concept Smith draws upon is the so-called bifurcation of nature, originally identified by Alfred North Whitehead. This bifurcation is an epistemological rupture. On one side, nature as it appears, rich, qualitative, meaningful, and present in lived experience, the life world. On the other side, nature is conceived by modern science, purely quantitative, abstract, and stripped of sensible qualities. This division results in science studying only the quantitative, measurable, mathematical, and idealized aspect of nature, effectively ignoring the qualitative reality that constitutes our direct experience. Smith uses quantum physics as a vivid example. The famous Schrödinger equation does not describe a body in the corporeal sense, X, but a probability state in a mathematical abstraction, SX. Thus, the quantum object never appears as a corporeal entity, but only as a state vector in Hilbert space, an entirely mathematical entity without direct sensible existence. The consequence is that quantum physics describes a world non-corporeal, detached from the lived world, deepening the Husserlian crisis. Science no longer speaks of concrete reality, but of an idealized structure existing only within calculations. In summary, Smith reveals how modern physics, by reducing the corporeal body, X, to a purely mathematical physical body, SX, exacerbates the bifurcation of nature. This drives science further away from the life world Husserl described, the real, lived reality. Having exposed the limits of modern science, Wolfgang Smith doesn't stop at critique. He offers a metaphysical restoration, a return to a traditional worldview. At the heart of his solution lies a concept as ancient as it is profound: the tripartite structure of reality. Modern science sees only one level, the physical. But Smith, drawing on traditional metaphysics and Christian philosophy, reintroduces a three-level cosmology. First, the spiritual supraphysical realm. This is the highest ontological domain. It is beyond space and time, the source of being itself. Here dwell the archetypes, the principles, the pure acts of being. It is the realm of vertical causation and metaphysical wholeness, what actually is in the truest sense. Second, the intermediary, subtle, animate realm. This domain is bound by time but not space. It is subtle, invisible to physics, yet it animates and informs corporeal beings. It corresponds to what Thomistic metaphysics calls substantial form. Third, the corporeal, physical, gross realm. This is the domain known to modern physics, space-bound, time-bound, quantitative. It is not the totality of reality, but its lowest expression. It becomes real only through the vertical influence of higher levels. Discovering this is more astonishing than you think, because physics operates in the corporeal realm, but only by reducing it through layers of mathematical and quantitative abstraction. That's to say that physics doesn't understand even the so-called physical world. Long before Husserl, before quantum theory, the philosopher Plotinus taught that reality is not a flat field of matter, but a great ascent, from the multiplicity of the world, through the soul, and back to the One. The One is not a thing among things. It is that from which all being flows. And as in Plotinus, so in the Vedas, so in the Church Fathers, so in Wolfgang Smith. The real is not built from the bottom up, but flows from the top down. We are not trapped in the physical. We are called to remember the wholeness from which we fell. The vertical path is not only metaphysical, it is also spiritual. Husserl showed us that modern science forgets the life world, the world of meaning, not just measurement. Wolfgang Smith demonstrated that science today mistakes abstraction for substance, confusing the lowest ontological layer for the whole of reality. He restores the tripartite cosmos, the corporeal, space and time, the subtle, time-bound but beyond space, the spiritual, beyond both space and time. This is not merely a model, it is the true structure of being. In the last pages of The Crisis of the European Sciences, Husserl cries out, "Europe is not a continent, it is an idea, a spiritual idea. And that idea is dying, not because of political failure, but because of a failure of meaning. Science has advanced, but man has forgotten what it means to be a human being. The crisis of the sciences, then, is not academic. It is existential. It is spiritual. So what if the world you see is not the whole world? What if the reality described by science is not reality, but shadow? What if your soul longs not for facts, but for essence? What if our civilization collapsed not from the outside in, but from the inside out, from a forgetting of being itself? The choice is not between science and superstition. The real choice is between fragmentation and wholeness, between a world reduced to dead equations and a cosmos animated by spirit, hierarchy, and vertical causality. To return to the real is not to regress, it is to remember, to ascend, to become again what we truly are. Beings suspended between earth and heaven, capable of truth, beauty, and metaphysical vision. As Plotinus said, never stop sculpting your own soul until the divine radiance of virtue shines forth. Only a new kind of philosophy, one that retrieves the spiritual dimension of man, can save Europe from meaninglessness. Edmund Husserl.